Ric Hauer, who is giving up part of his very limited vacation time in the summer to be with us here tonight. Ric is a 40-year,
it's even longer than that.
Oh, it's even longer than that, okay. But Ric works, he's a professor with the University of Montana, emeritus with the Flathead Lake Biological Station, which is part of the University of Montana, and has studied the waters here for decades and decades, and is one of the most knowledgeable and experts on the water quality and the issues here that impact it. So we are really lucky that Ric, we were able to hire Ric almost a year ago to look at what was being proposed. And we hired some other hydrologists as well. And we said, tell us, should we be worried about this? Is this something to be concerned on? And they said, whoa, yes, this is something that we have serious concerns. So they've done formal, official comments that were submitted to DEQ. And I think, as all of you are probably aware, DEQ looked at those comments, looked at the over 200 comments that came in from the public, almost 99% of which said, we don't think this is a good idea, and they rubber stamped the permit for allowing discharge to groundwater as part of the expansion. So we've asked Ric to come tonight and just tell you a little bit from his perspective and what he's learned from looking at both this application and the his knowledge.
Okay, so I've been working in the Flathead since 1976, so it's a little over 40 years. I'm not sure that the right word is hire when you give your time pro bono, but there you go. The other thing is, what I'm going to be speaking about tonight is a very narrow slice of what the issue really with the sewer district is dealing with, okay? So a couple of things first, and I teach courses to the Army Corps of Engineers now a lot. Just came off of a class last week. I've got another one coming up in another week. The Corps of Engineers, these are folks that have master's degrees and PhDs, and they still don't get a couple of things that I'm going to explain to you, and then we're going to get into sort of the picture of what's going on. The first thing, and you're going to go, if I'm insulting you, just, okay, be patient. Because a lot of people actually get these things confused. One is that Western science is a strategy. It's used to explain natural phenomenon. And it's done by obtaining and evaluating data. That's science. Science explains the facts as we currently understand them, right? We add to science and our knowledge continuously as we grow in the amount of data that we are able to gather. Sound public policy, on the other hand, involves choices and trade-offs, balancing what we know and reasonably predicting outcomes, what we might be able to achieve. Policy does not always follow science. Science delineates and advises the universe of possibilities. Within that universe, there are also social, economic, political, legal considerations. Right? Final policy moves around in that same universe of possibilities, but gets out of that universe to our peril. Right? We're looking at the sewer district that's been around now for 30 plus years. It is pretty old technology, but it has served Lakeside and sort of the northwest corner of Flathead Lake fairly well. There is a complaint now, alleges that DEQ issued a discharge permit for a new wastewater facility without properly analyzing how nutrients could degrade Flathead Lake. So that's sort of the beginning of the issue. Currently, Flathead Lake is impaired based on DEQ's standards. That impairment is due to nutrient pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus, and septic leachate from high-density older systems. So what is this phosphorus and nitrogen issue, and why is it a problem? Both of these are essential nutrients. That means that for growth to take place, all the way from bacteria to human beings, they must have phosphorus and nitrogen. First, phosphorus. Phosphorus is essential life for growth, and it is a central element in DNA. So without phosphorus, you can't make DNA. If you can't make DNA, then you can't reproduce. Your cells cannot reproduce, and you can't grow. Right? Nitrogen is an essential life growth nutrient. It is central in amino acids. So amino acids are wrapped around a nitrogen atom. Without nitrogen, there's no amino acids. With no amino acids, there are no proteins, no enzymes, and no structure. Both of those are in very limited supply. Phosphorus comes from the rock. Nitrogen comes from our atmosphere. Nitrogen exists in the atmosphere as N2 gas. It is a triple bond. It is extremely difficult to break. It is bacteria that break it. And then the nitrogen gets into our natural food webs. That's how it naturally gets in, is through bacteria. It also could get in through lightning, can split the nitrogen bond, forming nitrate. Nitrate falls to the ground, it gets taken up by plants. The reason why this is so important is that in terrestrial systems, there's a lot of nitrogen, and in aquatic systems, they have evolved in very low phosphorus and nitrogen in their natural waters like Flathead Lake. Roughly 1,000 times lower, or even more. So when there's leakage coming off the landscape or from a sewage treatment plant, that concentration of phosphorus and nitrogen literally overwhelms really clean fresh water, like Flathead Lake. Does that make sense? Okay. Because if you don't get that, the rest of this will make no sense at all. This is a LiDAR image of the Nyack floodplain up on the Middle Fork. I'm sure everyone in here has driven through the Nyack, right? That's what it looks like from the air with a LiDAR imager. So what this is a digital elevation model. Look at all the places that the river has been. Right? The river is all over that. Now I'm going to take you on a little quick trip to something called an esker. There's eskers in Montana. There are eskers up in Canada. There's eskers in Ireland and Scotland, places where glaciers have gone out onto the landscape 20,000 years ago, melted in place, and a river has flowed underneath the glacier. And it leaves behind a river bottom that is perched on top of the ground. The ice goes away, the sidewalls of the glacier, the sidewalls of the glacier form the edges of the banks of the river, and the bottom of the river is gravel. Why that's important is this. This happens to be an esker that is being mined. Look at the incredible array of different lenses of gravel in that subsurface. So when you go walking around in the Flathead, down around the rivers, this is what's under your feet. This is what's under your feet. The rivers create differential flow pathways of the sands and gravels that are being deposited by the river and then worked and reworked. Worked and reworked. And where the river has been, it will set up a preferential flow pathway, sort of like what you might see here with this gravel here. Or if it's all sands, fine sands versus really coarse sand. Right? Everybody still with me? Yes. Okay. So let's go and look at the Flathead. You all know what this looks like, of course. This is just a Google image of the Flathead. Here is up in the far corner, Columbia Falls, Kalispell, the reach beside Columbia Falls, or by Kalispell, and then the meandering river down to Flathead Lake. This is highly braided. This is meandering through sediments that were laid down subaqueously at the end of the last glacier when Flathead Lake was 40 feet higher than it currently is. Right. So here is, in shading, above Kalispell, between Columbia Falls and Kalispell, that is the zone of connectivity between the Flathead Channel and the subsurface gravels, so that the water is leaving the channel, goes out through that subsurface, very much like the sediments of the esker, okay? And the rate of flow is on the order of hundreds and hundreds of yards or meters in a day. So that's the reason why when the Flathead River floods and it hasn't even overtopped its bank, stuff starts popping up out on the valley floor, out on the floodplain. I'm sure everybody in here has seen it, right? Okay. That's because it's all hydrologically connected. Now we're going to drop down to here. So here's with Flathead Lake and what's going on up above, and here's what's down in the reaches down closer to the lake. And here is the location of the sewage treatment plant, Lakeside sewage treatment plant. those sloughs. It's not just surface water going, oh my, look at that, isn't that a cool place for ducks? Those are surficial expressions of preferential flow pathways. So if we just kind of zoom into this, what we have here, you see what's going on here? The river used to be here, and it is going through something that we call cut and fill, where it's cutting a bank and it's filling on the inside of the bend. And it's cut, fill, and it's doing that over decades. And when it does that, when it cuts and fills on the back side of that, the fines go on the back side, and the more coarse material is being sorted out and winnowed away by the flow of the river. Okay? Now watch what happens. That's where this is. Here's another LiDAR image. So you can actually see what's going on. So this is stunning. Right? So there are preferential flow pathways in and around the existing sewage treatment plant. And they're all over the place on this lower end of the Flathead River from basically Big Fork to Summers up to Kalispell. That river was back and forth for millennia. And when it's doing that, it's sorting out fines, it's depositing them on the inside of bends, and it's cutting on the outside of the bend. And it's making these series, a lattice work of preferential flow pathways. Okay? All right. So here is our site. You can see the preferential flow pathways expressed on the surface simply by the different color of the soil, where on the ridges it is lighter, and in the swale it's darker because the soils have been migrating downslope, and it's just a little bit, you know, right? In some cases it's a lot, and in other cases, you know, we're talking about multiple feet of a surface connection that still remains back to the river. So here's the site of the current treatment plant. It is an old style ponding system where it goes sequentially through a series of ponds, and then when it gets to the last pond, during the growing season, water is pumped to irrigate out over here. The water that gets pumped and then irrigated goes through basically two things. One, some of it can kind of trickle down into the sands. A lot of it ends up as evapotranspiration and growth of the plants that are being watered by the irrigation system. That's the whole purpose, and that's why that works. During the winter, that doesn't work. So you empty the ponds and get them all sort of empty in the fall so that you can take on the winter waters that you can't get rid of. That's the current system. The proposed system is to upgrade the receiving facility, process it, and then take those waters that come out of the treatment plant and put them into one of three pits that are not leach ponds. They are specifically meant to leach the water into the subsurface. with the idea that it would go into the subsurface sands, go into the sand, and then move laterally. So now, what's actually under the surface here? At about the top 30 feet is this sand and so forth that's been mobilized and moved around by the river. Under that is highly, highly compact material that water moves through very, very slowly. So applying water to the site does not result in infinite water going down and down and down and down and down. What it's going to do is it will mound, and then it'll start spreading out. Okay? So the northernmost corner of the Lakeside Sewer District property is about 750 feet, right here, about 750 feet to Wiley Slough, which is directly connected to Ashley Creek, which is directly connected to the Flathead River, which is directly connected to the Flathead Lake. Okay. So this is all surface water connection. The western edge of the injection pit is about 500 feet to this slough that has also been ditched and carries water directly into Wiley Slough. So 750 in the one direction, 500 in the other direction. Okay, so putting this into proper perspective, what does all this really mean? So a local increase of loading of sewer waters, 200,000 gallons a day, that's the proposal, with it getting up to 900,000 gallons per day. Hard to get your brain around, well, what's 900,000 gallons? It sounds like a lot, but is it? How do we deal with this spatially? Okay, so 7.84 gallons to the cubic foot. Okay? Okay. And there's 43,560 cubic feet in 1 acre foot. So that covers an acre, 1 foot deep. Okay? So that's a commonly used, if you have a water right to something you might own 1 acre foot, that's what that is. There's 120,321 cubic feet per day, or 2.76 acre feet per day. An acre that deep in effluent water, going into something that is 30 feet deep before it runs into an impermeable layer. So roughly take about 20 days to fill the upper square, this one right here, which is where the 2 pits are. This square right here, take roughly 20 days to fill the upper square to 1 foot in depth. Probably more than a year to fill the entire area to 30 feet, with the exception of one thing, and that is sand occupies roughly 70% of the space. That's if it was a swimming pool. Sand occupies 70%, and only the interstitial space, there's 30%. Right? So what does this mean? Well, turns out that there are preferential flow pathways running through the site, just like what you have seen. They put out 5 test wells. They ranged in flow rate between 70 feet per day and up to 500 feet per day. So In one case, they just happened to hit a spot where they were in pretty compacted sand. And in another site, it's very open in one of these preferential flow pathways. 500 feet in a day. Right? The distance to Wiley Slough, 750 feet. Distance to this slough right here. So this gives you an idea, better perspective. Here's the slough, here's the site. Right, so this right here, from here to here, 500 feet. If it gets into a preferential flow pathway, and they're everywhere. Anybody have any experience with building? Do you know what a French drain is? These things work just like a French drain. Right? So you pound it, you increase the water, and the water doesn't just pond up, it's pushing down, and it's going out. Right? And it catches one of these preferential flow pathways, and it just cycles right out.
Least resistance.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh. Was that the end of this? I guess that was the end of this. I guess. I need to finish up with the nutrients. Okay. So nutrients and NP. Nitrogen levels in Flathead Lake run around, pretty commonly around 80 parts per billion, or 80 micrograms per liter. It's one of those things where in the United States we do things in cubic feet and then we switch over to liters. Drives everybody crazy. You know? Is there an equivalence? No, and there never will be. You know, it's one of those things. Yeah. So 80 parts per billion, 80 micrograms per liter, right? PO4 values are typically really, really low, around 1 up to 4 micrograms per liter. Water coming out of an outstandingly run sewage treatment plant, I mean like the best, is 1 part per million of phosphorus, 1,000 times higher. And what comes out of with nitrogen, boy, if they are just outstanding, around 8 or 9. If there's any kind of then it goes up to like 10 or 12, pretty easy, because it's actually being processed at trying to drive it down below 20. So the problem with both the phosphorus and the nitrogen are they're in completely different cycles and different mechanisms. Phosphorus is cycling here, nitrogen is cycling separately, and the main point here is that roughly 1,000 times higher in P, nitrogen anywhere from 100 to 500 times higher is what comes out of the sewage treatment plant and goes through sand that, if it were to take years as being proposed, it might process the nitrogen, except that nitrogen going from nitrate to gaseous nitrogen is an anaerobic process, and they're stripping all the carbon out of it, so there's no food for it to actually do it. So it's the whole idea of a massive filtration system to take care of your nitrate problem is not a good one. The idea of upgrading your sewage treatment plant, really good one. You guys are facing a problem, right? You have to do something. The problem is what you're going to do with the wastewater at the end. what's being proposed now, I think is going to be a problem. And that going into Flathead Lake is going to create a problem. And it's going to create a problem that could shut the whole thing down. You spend something, $32 million on something that then doesn't work, then what do? Right? You have blown your wad up front on the wrong thing. So now it's time to set the science aside, and you're going to now get into policy and politics. What are you actually going to do, right? Because things are going to grow. People are moving into the Flathead. 1980 came and went. And if you were here in 1980 and you look around, you go, oh, geez. All right? You can thank some of the Flathead County commissioners during the 1980s and 90s and into the 2000s that did not want to have any zoning. What zoning is what? Looking ahead, trying to make logical decisions about your community. Now you got a situation where you've got 20 to 30,000 septic fields that have septage and they have no place to put it. Does anybody in here know what they're doing with it? If I told you what they were doing with it, you'd be outraged. Because they're doing something with it, right? Yeah, they're putting it on fields, like a manure spreader. But it's not cow manure. It's human, right?
And when we run out of those fields, where are they going to put it?
You're going to have to be part of a really smart solution where you think it through really carefully about what you're going to do with the water. The site for the upgraded sewage treatment plant, with the exception of just going like that with the water and thinking, out of sight, out of mind. Just, let's sort of like trust us, everything will be okay. Don't, because it won't. Right? The risk is too high. If they're right, awesome. If they're wrong, the consequences are really severe. So you want to make sure you get it right. Okay. An opportunity for a couple questions.
Are they being advised by some engineering firm regarding this? Biological firm, something.
DEQ worked with an engineering firm, and what they did was they put out 5 test wells, and one of them is at the 500 feet per day doing falling head tests. The others are like 50 feet and 7 feet, and they chose to run their models on the 7 foot a day. All right. So there are some problems with the output coming from DEQ. Citizens for a Better Flathead contacted me and asked if I would take a look at it, and we put together a short report that then went to DEQ during their public comment period, and then after the public comment period was over, they issued the permit. And now it's in your hands.
It is in our hands.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
want to make sure we get maybe one more question here, because
So if the lawsuit goes to court, are you going to be testifying this right here?
I don't
Or
know.
another person? And does the tribe have somebody like you that agrees with you?
Oh, there's nobody like me, gosh. Thank God.
So where will you be?
Where will I be?
Yeah, if it goes to court.
I have been in court a lot. of times. So, and you know, it's one of those things where if you get asked to go to court, you go to court. So things that are in the Flathead, because my life has been spent here in the Flathead, I do everything in the Flathead pro bono. Everything outside of the Flathead, I cost way too damn much. Well, it's true. So.
What's your recommendation?
Oh, wow. Well,
Respectfully, if you can stay a little bit.
I gotta go. How long do you want me to? Let me ask you to answer that one question, then I'm out of here. Okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? What you do? I think you got to get the water off of this floodplain. This is a floodplain right here. You got to. There was a flood in 1897, 1896. None of us were there. Right? Do you know what the Klondike was? It's a paddle wheeler. It went from Summers straight to Demersville. This whole thing, from here all the way to Kalispell, was under about 7 feet of water. It went, Flathead Lake, before the dam, went to 7 feet above what today we consider full pool. So one of the things is this system can really crank sometimes. Help the people that live down there, but the main thing is you got to get the wastewater up and off of that floodplain. Right? That's the main thing. Deal with it. Tahoe, they pump their water out of the basin. Okay.
Please join me in thanking Ric.
And
We'll have a video of this, so folks that weren't here will be able to see it later. And, you know, send us your questions. We'll try to make sure that they get answered, but that was phenomenal.
well, hey, everybody, thank you so much for coming in. Listen.